Stefan, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Man.
All right. Nice watch.
Oh, thanks, brother. Good morning to you.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me today. You are very interesting. I was curious about cycles, and I discovered you, and I didn't even know how you got started. I know that you've had incredible experiences with, I'll say, other dimensions possibly, and you have some interesting insights from not just from your education and your past, how you started, but just how you started looking at Bitcoin and cycles. So I was really interested to talk to you and get more insights from you. For everyone who's new, introduce yourself and tell us how you got into what you do and also how you found your way over to crypto.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Stefan BURNS, and I went to school for geology, geophysicist, became a YouTuber. Just really started to follow my kind of sole purpose mission life path. That's what I call it. But one of the things I find very interesting and what kind of brings everything together and into coherence is that I really just like understanding cycles. And so you really study and learn that with geology. Like with that college education I got there, we just looked at a lot of long-term geologic cycles, like climate cycles and like rock cycles, tectonic, like all these different things, earthquake recurrence intervals, things of this nature. And I've always been interested in finance. I mean, my dad was like telling me about stocks ever since I was like 5 years old because he's a big stock trader. So that was always in the background. And so naturally, and I knew it was going to be important to like do some basic investment when I was young. And so that led me to a few different areas which paid off pretty nicely. Because it's just a numbers and a length game, right? Just how much time you're in it. So I naturally found kind of some of my education with geology and geologic time and understanding these long time horizons and how these cycles play out just very naturally went into financial markets. And then that very nicely went into things like solar activity and different cycles with the planets. And so then I started researching how they're all connected together. And so I've done that kind of in the background because my YouTube channel, which is, you see that on my profile name there, that's mostly for like space weather and earth geophysics. But I really look quite a bit into how this is connected to financial markets. And I'm just now at the beginning of that, I would say, because it's pretty wide open field, especially in terms of like planetary alignments in financial markets. But it's fascinating. There seems to be something there. And so it's cool to talk about this. I first learned about crypto through it's a funny story. There was a miscellaneous forum on bodybuilding.com because I've always been into health and wellness and fitness. Yeah. And this is back in 2016, and people are like, what's the next Bitcoin? And someone mentioned in the miscellaneous, like the finance section of the miscellaneous section, like this deep rabbit hole, right? Yeah. Someone mentioned Ethereum. They're like, bro, just load up your bags, just get some, and you're going to be good. And so I was watching that. I had no understanding what it was, but I was watching that and I saw it go from like 12, 11 bucks and start plummeting down to like $6. And I was like, well, I guess if I'm going to ever get some, I should get some now. And so I just picked up a little bit back in 2016 when that was happening. And then watching that really explosive price growth in Ethereum in the beginning of 2017, first it rebounded out of that. And then it, 14, 15 bucks, all of a sudden it was 20. You're like, whoa. Yeah. Then it was 50. It's like, holy shit. And then it went to 400 and then it had its retracement to 135 and then all the way up to 1400. And well, now we're in 2024, but it was really wild. And that got me into the rest of the cryptoverse. And, that really then took me into Bitcoin more so than Ethereum. But all the proof of work chains, I think, are really great. I think they're really foundational technologies. But they are connected with these cycles that are still just now beginning to be seen. The halving cycle being the most well-known. But how are these cycles correlated, interrelated to other natural cycles? That's a very interesting question that I like to explore.
Yeah, 100%. There's definitely something to it. You know, right now, if we look at Bitcoin, we can see it's following the moon phases. It's not always consistently there, but it has been recently. It's been going up and down to it. And how big of cycles, though, do you go? I know you've mentioned 14, 15, 16-year cycles in some of your videos. Do you think that's accurate? And because Bitcoin now is officially approaching 16 years, right? It's 15 years old now.
Yeah, right around there.
Yeah. And you're saying all of crypto is following these major cycles.
Well, I mean, we also see, for example, like monetary supply and interest rates and all this, how that affects, you know, whether it's easy money phase, hard money phase, right? Correlations with the S&P, correlations with gold, or, you know, where they're not correlated, but like what's the level of correlation? I think that plays out also with some of these other natural cycles. And so, for example, the solar cycle is 12 years. And so every 12 years, it on average, the magnetic field of the sun will flip its polarity. Of course, the sun is the big engine of energy in our solar system. So without that, the Earth would be cold, barren, lifeless, nothing would be operating. And so at some point, everything traces back to the sun. And we see these clear correlations between solar activity and, in general, what's kind of known as global consciousness and activity amongst people. And it seems that at solar maximums, where the magnetic field is flipping and solar output is the highest, you have just more kind of societal change and greater volatility across different systems. And so you can have higher highs, higher lows, whatever that is touching upon, like booms and busts, things of this nature. And so I imagine this correlates into Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is this totally decentralized, currency that is, connecting the entire world together. And so, I mean, there's definitely big actors and things that you sometimes see these clear price channels that, big money is kind of creating. But in general, it is one of these few assets that it's as close to perfection as it can be in terms of its price reflecting all the available data that's known at the time. And so as a result, it would be Bitcoin and other, I would say, like proof of work currencies that were just fairly launched, would be some of the prime assets in relation to showing a better correlation with natural cycles as compared to something that, let's say, is controlled by, venture capital, right? They're like, there's a private company and then they have their IPO and now there's a whole bunch of insiders that are selling, but you don't really have that with Bitcoin so much anymore, especially because it's older. The only one that could really shake it up in a big way would be Satoshi. If he was all of a sudden just like dump his coins, that would be kind of an unexpected shock. But other than that, you can have these correlations more easily show themselves, perhaps, because of its decentralized global nature. And we see that.
Yeah. You mentioned Satoshi. Do you think, are you mentioning that because you see something in the cycles that tell you something like he's coming back, or because we've all assumed that he either has passed away or it's pretty much that's the assumption, that he's passed away, that this person is no longer around. But you think this person might be around?
I don't know. That's a big rabbit hole. I mean, the furthest I went was like John McAfee saying that he found him, and supposedly he's some like college professor, and he's just like chilling, and every now and then he'll sell 50 coins, right? Because they don't really know exactly those early blocks with those, like each one with the 50. I mean, they have a pretty good sense of like which ones are Satoshis and which ones aren't, but he mined so many. It's not like, and it's pseudonymous. So, and he was good because he didn't have like each wallet was only used once. And so, and there is still a lot of ambiguity. So, like, it's not like Satoshi.
Who knows how many
it's
wallets he
possible
actually
that he
has?
sold some.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That he still has mystery wallets. We don't know whose they are, and they just sell a certain amount every once in a while, right?
Yeah, and so the headline when that happens is Satoshi era wallet sells 50 coins or moves 50 coins. That could be Satoshi. It's just I think people are expecting, if he's alive, that all of a sudden he's going to sell out like 50% of his stash or something. But let's say in this hypothetical, he is some university professor and he built it from, kind of this ethos of his and has seen it grow and had that larger perspective from the beginning. You'll sell 50 every now and then just to fix up the house and make life a little good, but you'll just let that ride because that's one of the things that actually helped it grow in the first place was mining a whole bunch and then just letting it sit in the supply, totally locked down, not moving. If he had been selling it actively the moment markets opened up, I'm not sure Bitcoin would have survived because he added this fantastic foundation of just support to it as a result of not doing anything. But he could be dead. It could be a group of people. People think it may be like the CIA or something, and there's a whole backdoor. I mean, who knows? But I could see that professor angle that John McAfee was talking about. I could see that being the case, but who knows?
Who knows, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we definitely have a lot of things happening in the world now. As you mentioned, with these cycles, they're timed with events. I mean, we are certainly not in a boring time right now. It is crazy. Is this because the solar maximum? Now, in one of your recent videos, talked about the solar cycle and Bitcoin. So I guess we can go right into that. You talked about we're at one of the highest peaks it's been in how long?
Since at least like the early 2000s, 2001. I mean, I could look specifically to see if we measure by sunspots. There's a few ways to measure solar activity. But for August, for example, we hit a sunspot record high of 215. And the prediction for solar cycle 25 was going to be maximum like 150, 140. Now that was August. September, we dropped back down to like 150 or so. But now in October, just with the first day of October, sunspots blasted past 200 once more. So we're way back up there again. We just had two massive X flares blast off from the sun, an X 7.1 and X 9 on the 1st and on the 3rd of October. And so the X 9 solar flare, there's different designations. There's A, C, M, and X. X being the most energetic. Mm-hmm. They're measuring X-ray radiation coming off of the sun. That is the strongest solar flare of this entire solar cycle and stronger than any solar flare from solar cycle 24, which is pretty weak. One of the weakest in like a century. And so the early growth of Bitcoin was during solar cycle 24, like when it was first launched and then it first hit trading markets. That was right when solar cycle 24 was going up. And there's a pretty perfect correlation between the solar activity going up and the price of Bitcoin going up.
Okay.
It could just be because of a temporal connection, right? They were both just happening at the same time.
Okay. So we're approaching what you're saying might be the biggest peak we've seen in solar activity in 2025.
2024, 2025, possibly 2026, really big years for solar activity. I mean, definitely this year and next year.
Okay.
And almost certainly 2026, but sometimes there's like double peaks in the sunspot numbers, but solar radio flux is like a better measure. It's been just charging up. It's been going nuts.
Okay.
And that's an actual frequency of light that the sun emits that you can measure with different radio observatories around the world.
Okay.
We saw the craziest growth in Bitcoin during the ascending phase of solar cycle 24, when the magnetic flip was underway and solar energy output was going up like crazy. And then we had that peak in 2017 during the very end of the descending phase, and things have kind of been muted ever since that, right? Like we hit 20,000 for Bitcoin right there, exactly. Yeah, right around there. In 2017, I think it was like December, or maybe it was like January 7th or January 8th of 2018. No, it was like, yeah, anyways, right in that zone. But then we kind of had this, the last bull run in 2020 was kind of weak. We didn't hit 100K, but we were kind of muted in the lower period. But now we're in this ramping up period again. So perhaps if there is a correlation, we'll see a really big explosive price increase in Bitcoin in 2020, like starting, I guess, soon and in 2025. And we have that perfect, as you show on the screen, that perfect cup and handle with the ascended handle. It's really like a textbook trading pattern there. So that's also really looking nice.
Yeah, he's referring to this here and this handle over here. This would have a pretty massive target if it breaks out.
If you add that handle on, that takes at least to 100K. But then that would just be breaking, as Bitcoin does. Once it kind of breaks certain numbers, and it just goes ballistic. And we know the halving cycle is kicking in. So here's the point. What we see with physics and waves is that you can have constructive or deconstructive interference. So you can have two waves add on top of each other and the peak will be higher. And then you have two waves subtract from each other and it'll like dampen the effect. So if like noise canceling headphones, it's because they're listening to your ambient environment and playing the opposite waveform. And so that cancels out the sound. But we have a halvening cycle that we know will happen because it already had the halvening. And so there is going to be this supply cycle that continues to play out. I think that's probably going to become more and more muted with time, but we know that cycle is in effect right now. And then we have this solar cycle, and how constructive is that with the halvening cycle is kind of an unknown, but we know it's happening. And so now we have that second layer. And then there's also certain planetary conjunctions, which seem to be linked to the price of Bitcoin as well. And so we have that one also in the background.
What is this planetary one? I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, so I could go to this cycle, this one here. So if you go to my, there we go. On the left, those purple lines denote when there was a conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus in the sky. Okay. And so we had a perfect alignment between Earth, Jupiter, and Uranus. And there's certain archetypal energies that they're connected to. Jupiter's like expansion, and Uranus is like radical change, to keep it really simple. And Bitcoin's a pretty radical technology, and we see this massive expansion in the Bitcoin price during that triple conjunction sequence. So there's three purple lines. And then you have that solar activity denoted by sunspots with the black dots at the bottom. We just had a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction.
Can you use your pointer and
oh yeah,
I'm pretty sure we know if you can help. Does it do it?
It's not showing up actually. But if we look to the right side of the screen, we'll see the other purple line.
You're talking about January 2020, around that's what you were talking about, right?
January 2024, if we look at the right side of this graphic here.
Yeah, okay. January 2024, okay.
We'll see that H4, that stands for the fourth halvening for Bitcoin.
Okay, yeah.
And that fourth halvening was on April 21st or April 20th. I think it was April 20th. Mm-hmm. One day after that occurred, there was another Jupiter-Uranus conjunction because they have a 14-year synodic cycle in our solar system. So every 14 years approximately, they can go conjunct in our night sky. We'll see them overlap each other. So we had a triple sequence at the very beginning of Bitcoin's price discovery back in like 2010, the left side of the screen. We had the solar activity ramping up. Then now in 2024.
So really quick, in January of 2010, around the beginning, that was the last Jupiter Uranus conjunction, correct?
Yeah.
And then we're
3 of them in a row.
Oh, far out. And then this one just happened at this last halving.
Like on the dot. And that's so like, I don't believe in coincidence. So it's like, that's pretty wild that the lineup on that is like spot on. And there was 2 other cryptocurrencies that had significant events on that day. There was, I mean, take it for what's worth, but Dogecoin had Doge Day on 420. And so that's not like a built-in software thing, but kind of a community expression for Dogecoin. And then Monero had, what do they do? They had like some sort of, is like, oh, that's the birthday of Monero is 420. And so you had Monero's first block birthday on that 420 date as well. So all 3 of those proof of work chains, which are, you know, some of the gold standards for this stuff, lined up exactly with that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which is all about expanding radical technologies in science and our understanding of the world. And it's there to help. What we see in the history, in the correlations with this, is that it gives a lot of power to people that are there to shake things up and to prove and to liberate, you know, different structures and humanity in general. Like it's a conjunction that's associated with like engineers and radical breakthroughs and new societal structures that are there for the common man, to benefit the common man. And so just interesting correlations, right? And like that coincidence of that date is like mind blowing to me. So
that is far out. Now, around that time, obviously Bitcoin had hit its high and it's been kind of consolidating, coming down. Is that normal, or the expansion happens in this next 14-year phase? Is that how we look at it?
Yeah. So there is like, you know, the timing on this stuff isn't like exact. So you don't have the conjunction and then that day to, you know, that God candle pops up. So that would be great. That'd be ideal.
That would be cool.
But this is a 14-year synodic cycle. And so you have kind of like waypoints. The next waypoint will be when there is a square between Jupiter and Uranus. And that's going to, I guess, like in 3 years or so, roughly. And then you have an opposition between them. So they'll be on opposite sides of the sky.
What does the square tell us? What does that mean for us?
Well, it's a little bit more of a tense aspect. So with the conjunction between these, if we're talking about the archetypal signature, conjunctions where they're like, they're face to face and they're like, okay, here's our game plan. We're on the same page. Cool. Shake hands. We're good. Right. And depends on the signature of a planet, but some of them are a little bit more antithetical to each other. And so they may shake hands, but they're still kind of like, you know, but Jupiter and Uranus are very harmonious, and they're like harmonics of each other. And so they shake hands pretty nicely. You know, it's like you and your grandpa. Most people get along with their grandpa, right? Maybe with the father, there can be some struggles, but with grandpa, you know, he's cool. Same deal. And because Uranus is the grandfather of Zeus. So they meet up in this conjunction, but then you start to have a little bit of a change because they have different orbit speeds around the sun. And so with that first square, there's a bit more tension. And then with the opposition, they're kind of on opposite sides now. And then they go through a closing square, then they meet up again for a conjunction. And so we had that whole cycle play out from the beginning of Bitcoin to now. So
to understand some of the timing really quick, so we're looking at possibly an expansion until for the next 3-4 years, till 2027, 2028 possibly. And then after that point, it goes into that, what was the word you used? The square, where it's
tense.
A tense, so we can expect volatility or a consolidation period. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess you can say that pretty roughly. I think what I see a little bit more is again, the constructive or deconstructive interference. So it's like you will have that positive constructive phase in the overall, you could say, kind of energy field for the next 3 years. So will it completely counteract, like, let's say, a change to monetary policy, or like some detrimental effect? Let's say there's like a big recession, or they decide to raise rates even higher. I'm not speaking to what people think is going to happen, just possibilities, right?
Right.
It may not be able to completely counteract that, but it appears, based on the limited history of Bitcoin, because it's very new, it's only gone through one synodic cycle, but based on the prior triple conjunction sequence that we see on the left-hand side, those 3 purple lines, the price growth of Bitcoin that corresponded afterwards, and then how it slowed down as we reached that first square opposition and closing square, we see that during that initial, let's say 3 year period after that conjunction sequence, that is when things are the most pleasing and the most beneficial and positive and benefic for the price of Bitcoin.
Okay.
And as a result of this lining up with the birthday of Monero and also Doge Day, I think it's likely to occur for those two as well. But that's without getting into them. Just in general, with those 3, I think this benefic effect could play out. But will it counteract all the other stuff that could have detrimental effects on the price? That's a whole different conversation.
Okay.
So that could, for example, like, let's say 2025 is a big year, right? But then there is eventually a bear market, price goes down, let's say 2026 through 2027. This may dampen and reduce the effect of the bear market, because we're going to still be coming right off of that conjunction. But who knows? It's all just kind of interesting things to look at if you already are tired of looking at TA all the time and everyone's opinion, right? You can start to look at these things. And
no, there's definitely something here. I mean, it's uncanny how you've got that 14-year cycle in this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction lining up now. And obviously we're all expecting, whether we have some volatility here or, some, hoo-ha with the election, whatever. But I think most of us are expecting a rise in this market going into 2025. That we're all feeling that there's a lot more left in this bull run, without a doubt. Now, is there, isn't there? I don't know, but this is certainly another thing to look at to help us understand. And we're starting this new phase in conjunction. We can see the first one here in 2010. 29 was the start of Bitcoin, and we saw that it was quite expansive time for the whole asset class. But like you're saying, it doesn't have to happen tomorrow or next month. It could start, this expansion could start, 3 months from now or the beginning of the year, 2025 or whatever. We don't know. Yeah, it's really cool. I know, just looking at the chart, if I come back here, it's, let me come back to this guy. If I just turn on, obviously, everyone knows this. I think by now most people understand some of these moon phases. You can see some.
I didn't know you could do that on TradingView. That's cool.
Oh yeah. The moon phases are on here, and
Nice.
it's not always when you go back, but generally you can see from the start of this consolidation period, we had the new moon and consolidation, and we see a rise, and it's been swinging right with the moon cycles, like right on point. And I remember in 2021, we had a phase where it was also doing it too. And you see this rise, and now we've got another one of these guys. So we can now expect, possibly a little more downside until we have this new moon there, or full moon or whatever.
Wow.
So you can't deny that there's something there. Is it by design? Are people, market makers, at a high level doing this, or does this somehow just because we're just tapped in and tuned in as like a whole, like the consensus of our, our connection to the at another dimension where we're all connected and we're all kind of moving it because we're connected to the as above so below the stars, so to speak. I don't know, or is there a hand manipulating this? I don't know, but there's something there for sure, without a doubt.
So that's a good example of a shorter term like variation or wave pattern, right? A higher frequency secular variation. And the fact that this most recent 6-month period of price action does nicely match up with the lunar phases shows that Bitcoin does have a connection to some of these astronomical phenomenon.
Yeah.
And so you could either say you could just say coincidence, right, and write it off, or you can put some level of interest into that, right? And now there's going to be some people that are going to completely believe it, and it may the pattern at some point may break, and that'll be to their detriment. So you have to kind of be cautious but optimistic with this, right? Conservative,
right?
But it's right. That right there is showing some connection to what you could call planetary resonances. And the moon is related to our material reality and wealth and finance. It's one of the premier points if we study astrology connected to financial markets. And so the fact that it is correlating very nicely with the moon is great because it adds, in my mind, it gives me a little bit more confidence that there's a correlation with solar activity and with other planetary resonances, like, as we talked about, the Jupiter-Uranus synodic cycle. And so I think that's the special thing about blockchain, and why I didn't make this video, for example, on the S&P 500 or something, is I think the more decentralized and open we can make a financial asset, the more it'll be able to enter into correlation with these archetypal energies that exist that make up our reality in this solar system and beyond. This is kind of my model of understanding that seems to keep playing out and reaffirming itself the more I research into it through things exactly like this.
Yeah, 100%. I think blockchain is still more in the natural and more connected to our emotions, of course. Now it's becoming more institutionalized. How long that's going to continue, we don't know. Do you have any thoughts about the 4-year cycle? Some people are debating whether it's going to be broken, or do you think it's going to somehow always connect to it?
Well, as we talked about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, I think it's a constructive influence. But if there's enough deconstructive energy put into this next 4 years, for example, or at this point 3.5, then perhaps we don't see the signature of that halvening cycle. This is just a hypothetical, but it's all about the signal to noise ratio. And so we know there's a halvening signal, and we see it. My rule of thumb in general is that if you see something 3 times, there's a trend. And so we see the price growth of Bitcoin correlating really nicely with that halvening, then afterwards 3 times. And so, okay, that's a pretty clear trend. At some point, these things will diminish, especially as that supply reduction keeps getting smaller and smaller. And I think the price will start to level out. That seems to be the case. But we're still fairly early into this. And so we know we can pretty confident that that signal is going to be there as a positive constructive influence. And they're just starting to ease rates. So we know that's going to be a positive constructive influence. We see this solar activity correlation. It's probably the weakest of the correlations if we're looking at halvenings, Jupiter-Uranus, and solar activity. But seems to be something there. I mean, I could go back on this chart. We see the yellow lines denote sunspot peaks. And even though we had this, if you look right at the center of this graphic near H2 and that yellow line, we see that peak H2 in 2017 for Bitcoin. And so that was on the very end of the descending phase of solar cycle 24. But we do see a kind of anomalous spike in sunspots right at the beginning of that final increase upwards. So that was something like July or August of 2017, that sunspot high. And then all of a sudden we get that final price push. So even during periods where solar activity was low, like that zone in 2016, 2017, we see kind of solar activity still reaffirming these price increases. And we see that again in 2020 with this kind of anomalous spike out of the solar minimum. The black dots at the bottom of the screen at 2020, right next to H3. We see that yellow line right on that sunspot kind of spike.
2021,
Yeah. And then we see that's right when that increase started to around 60,000 or so.
Right.
And so it looks like the price has almost been a little kind of dampened from the solar activity that we've been having and the increase there. I think it's the weakest correlation, but if there is a correlation, that may all kind of finally be realized in the price discovery of Bitcoin in 2025.
Okay.
And I also think about it also in terms of we just had Hurricane Helene, and I mean, my heart goes out to all those people that had so much destroyed. But really traditionally in so many markets, United States and China, real estate is seen as a way to preserve your wealth. And those people just lost everything. And so if you had your wealth on a thumb drive, you'd be fine.
Okay. Yeah. As opposed to in your property, you mean?
Yeah, in that specific example. And so I think more and more people are going to diversify and put a greater allocation of their net wealth into something that can just move with them. Because you don't know if all of a sudden some natural disaster, hurricane is going to blow over and, just totally destroy your house or land, property, whatever. Or with the Ukraine war, when it first broke out, there were people in Ukraine that had some Bitcoin. They were able to get across the border really fast. And all of a sudden, boom, they're in Poland, and they were able to just go to a Bitcoin ATM and pull their money out. And they were fine. Yeah. Because they had that safety net. I think that's going to be just for people boots on the ground, the actual everyday person, not institutional stuff. But I think that's going to become more and more important. And so we're seeing factors like that also kind of push into the price of Bitcoin. The rapid devaluation of a lot of currencies like the Egyptian pound, the Turkish lira. There's so many, they're all buying Bitcoin hand over fist. So there's so many positive, constructive factors going in. I think it's going to have a huge leg up soon. But who knows?
Okay. Yeah. If I were just looking at this chart as someone who looks at charts a lot, I see a massive push up into a new zone. Obviously, you've got this. Tell me these numbers mean this is a measurement of solar activity on the left, 200, 150, 150.
Sunspot numbers, yeah.
Sunspot numbers. So obviously you can see 150 was a resistance, obviously, where the sun just rarely went above that many per, however they're counting it, 150, and would come back to a support line, which was around 50. And then you can see, obviously, around the event, the viral event we had, it was at its
it
came back to its lowest. Yeah, I don't even know what word to use anymore. What's a safe word? But it went to a very low zone, and it's funny. It would timed perfectly. You can see the absolute bottom there with the reduced amount of solar activity. Now we've come back up to that 150 resistance line. We've touched above it, got a rejection. We came down. We formed a beautiful W pattern and had enough energy to blast through. The sun, it looks like the sun went up to 175 there. I'm on H4, line H4. And then did a back retest of an older high, which looks around 120, 170 maybe, 175 there. And then it's gone up to a new resistance level, which is 200. So if I was a betting man, I would think that it's going to come down, which tells me what? Does that, are we seeing too deep into that to think the price?
Well, one more data point for you is that August was 215. So that chart goes to July. And so that 196.5 figure, the most recent black dot, is July. And but August was 215. And then September was 150. And now it's it's ramping right back over 100, 200 again right now.
It is right now. Okay. Yeah. So we could see well, we don't know how it's going to line up, but maybe we have this push up starts soon. Then the solar activity is really picking up. I mean, obviously we see the madness picking up, like you've expressed the hurricane. You've got U.S. elections. We've got in the Middle East incredible amount of volatility happening there right now. It's been ongoing, and if you go back, looks like if you go back to October 7th, you can see that W was forming right there where, let's say, October 7th was, or was it already? Yeah, I mean, this seems to match up. Do you think powers that be are just doing what they do based on their sun worship or understanding, or you think it's just all coincidence that as this raises the kind of, we just kind of go in time with it? Or do you think their powers that be are looking at this stuff?
Well, I definitely think that, well, not everyone studies this stuff first and foremost, but I think there's quite a few people that do. I mean, there's I believe it's a J.D. Rockefeller quote that's like, millionaires don't use astrology, but billionaires do, right? It's like, okay. And then, I mean, Reagan him and his wife had like a astrologer on call, and they went through basically every decision with her. Yeah. Wow. And because his wife was super into it, and she has a tremendous, Nancy had tremendous influence over Reagan. So, like there was an astrologer in the White House. And so, the tracking in solar activity is kind of new. Yeah. And the connection to that, I wouldn't say there's too many people out there right now looking at things like solar activity and its correlation to financial assets or things of that nature, or even just like ebbs and flows in society and human consciousness. One reason I wanted to jump on the podcast with you is because I think there's a tremendous potential in anyone that just does technical analysis and reads a lot of charts, because we're amazing pattern recognition, like machines, you could say. Yeah. And it's in many ways, it's just seeing more and more data that gets you better and better at this whole equation. That's how it was with geophysics with me starting off. I just looked at a ton of geophysics data, and that helped me look and understand charts, because the same underlying like framework of reality manifests itself in financial charts, in solar activity charts, and planetary conjunction cycles, and in a billion different things. And so when you look at that, you're able to like glimpse into kind of this deeper aspect that is influencing reality. And so a lot of people spend a lot of time looking at financial charts, and it's very easily, in my experience, very easy to just shift that skill over into other things and be quite good at it pretty quickly. And so like the way you read the solar activity charts, like I would have read that exactly the same. These things play out like that.
Yeah, it's a couple of years just staring at this all day long, and the charts are charts. The charts don't lie. They're just not full of, humans are deceptive creatures, but the charts are, that's it, man. I'm so curious I know that I'm really into DeFi. So there's this amazing project called PulseChain, made by a guy named Richard Hart, people have a very volatile opinion of him either way, but I think he's doing really amazing things by creating a layer one that's decentralized. And I'm dying to know how it tracks with everything we've just talked about. So I'm just going to pull up a chart. It's only a year old, but if there's any dates you recognize or months, and I'd be curious.
Okay.
Sorry. All right. Let's see. So it came out summer in June. Is this too new? Is there anything we can see?
Well, the biggest planetary conjunction that we had this year was that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction.
Okay.
And so that would be one to look at. That's just basically April 20th of this year.
That happened April 20th.
I guess a higher frequency one would be lunar cycles. And then I'm just thinking of there's been a Jupiter and Saturn square that just started. And actually it looks like the very end of the chart, we're starting to rise up now in green.
Yeah.
Pretty nicely matches up with that Jupiter Saturn square that has been forming. Yeah, because that took place. It started to take place in September, and that's going to happen a couple more times all the way through mid 2025.
Wow. Okay.
And in 2025, we get 2026, we get a really big impulse with another great conjunction cycle, but this time between Saturn and with Neptune. And Neptune seems to be connected to interest rates in our recent history. And so I think that could have an influence on financial markets. And that first conjunction that they have is June of 2025. And then they'll have another one in February 2026. And so that would be a good one to watch. But again, these things take time to play out. So like all these projects, you're going to have to look at them like a year after that happens. Like 2027, 2028 to kind of see maybe what the effect was. And are they that connected to it?
Right. So tell me again, you said September 24th was the, September started, what was it again?
A square between Jupiter and Saturn. So if you look in the sky, they were 90 degrees apart in our 360 degree ecliptic circle grid around the sun.
Okay, interesting.
So that lines up pretty nicely with that square.
You can see this bottom range was from the 3rd of September until about the 9th, maybe about a week. And then we've just been breaking up since then.
It is nice price growth on that chart, especially right now when a lot of things are not growing. So that's a good sign.
Yeah, I think we're forming a W here. Obviously, if you look into PulseChain, you see the founders in a SEC lawsuit at the moment. I think the case is being finalized here October 31st on Halloween in New York City. And we'll see what happens. Maybe we're going to pump up until that case gets finalized. But it's very exciting. So we can I guess we looked at the pulse. Let's look at one more asset since we've got some. No, this isn't what I want to see. That's not what I want to see. Oh, here we go. This is one that got pummeled. It's called HEX. And I want to see really quick where that's September, March 24. And look at that. Very similar time range. We've been rising with that square.
Yeah, at least there's a time correlation. And so the square between Jupiter and Saturn kind of speaks to Jupiter and Saturn in general. Their conjunction cycles, they occur every 20 years. And they're the most well-tracked of these cycles going back thousands of years. And so if you start to study into this stuff, you realize that a lot of people that are really smart have been looking at this for a very long time. And they're correlated to changes in law and order. Because both Jupiter and Saturn, the two biggest gas giants, they seem to have this influence over our kind of structures in society. And so there's kind of a new law and order that's established every 20 years that then goes through revisions until it's reborn again. And so the square, this is an opening square between them because they met in 2020 on winter solstice, December 21st. And so with DeFi, there's a certain structure in DeFi, but at the same time, and they're trying to incorporate it into normal financial markets, you could say, and to kind of constrict it. But DeFi has been very much you could think of as weeds in a garden. Like they will just grow no matter what. And like back in 2020, like the summer of farming, where all these like farming chains were popping up and people were making a mint off of it, and there was no real like rules or regulations. And I think that's very much the ethos of DeFi. And so I could see with this square this tension between law and order and structure in our society building with Jupiter Uranus there in that configuration, and DeFi saying, well, know what, we're going to keep like doing our thing and grow no matter what, because it's very much kind of anti-establishment in many aspects.
100%. And it's funny, you said December of 2020, December 21st.
Yeah. That was the conjunction.
Look at that. This is when the rise began. It had come from nowhere and been consolidating, and then this massive rip roaring. It went from a third of a penny all the way up to 55 cents or something, 50 cents, let's say. So it was a run, and it started right around those dates you're mentioning.
So perhaps anytime there's a strong aspect, then Hex could do well. I mean, again, my rule of thumb is you want 3 in a row to really like be, okay, we're good. Yeah. But if you have a higher risk tolerance, then that's something you could, put a little bit into. But yeah, I mean, that first conjunction lines up nicely. And now with that square opening up, all of a sudden it's starting to increase in price again. Yeah. And that goes all the way till the middle of 2025.
Wow, that is amazing. Yeah, it looks like we're breaking through. This was a problem area, and it looks like we're climbing up out of it. So, let's see what happens. Nothing goes straight up, but we're looking good. And amazing to see how this rise and fall and the re-rise has lined up perfectly with these aspects. And you said it's Uranus and Jupiter, correct?
That's the one that happened this year.
Okay. That's a
14-year cycle.
And
that's Jupiter and Saturn.
Yeah, that's so interesting. This is Jupiter and Saturn because Hex is a 6-sided shape, and Saturn know has a giant hexagon on its pole. This is really,
bro, it's meant to be.
This is far out, man. Wow.
That is actually very interesting. Yeah, and Saturn represents structure and form and material reality. It's the general kind of idea, if you research into this stuff and take what resonates and apply some salt to all this, right? But the outer solar system beyond Jupiter or beyond Saturn represents kind of like this more imaginative, like 5D realm. Like it's not our normal 3D reality. And so this is like the liminal space with Neptune, or like the imaginative space with Uranus, or the kind of like the underworldly dark subconscious state with Pluto, right? And then you have these other dwarf planets that even go deeper into our psyche and our collective psyche and soul and such. Once you get to Saturn, instead of working out from the sun, we're working into the sun. When you get to Saturn, all that stuff then gets like applied and formed and like turned into material reality and then presented to us. And then Jupiter will deliver that to us in a bigger way, because there's like almost like a archetypal energy conveyor belt. And so Saturn takes all these things happening from the outer limits and turns it into concrete reality, which then he interacts with Jupiter to like manifest it very strongly into what we experience. And so with the Jupiter Saturn, now I'm just kind of brainstorming, riffing, but with the Jupiter Saturn cycle, that's starting in 2020. That effectively is like Saturn was taking all these notes with what was happening in the outer solar system and perhaps all the different cycles that were occurring out there with Uranus and Neptune and Pluto and the dwarf planets, all that stuff. And then, starting a new cycle with Jupiter. And so we would have to look back at what happened in the 2000s and 2010s to see because the last Jupiter or Saturn Jupiter cycle is in 2000, right? So we have to look at that 20-year period in between to then see what is the information that Saturn is formatting for us. But just looking at this HEX chart, again, there's only 2 data points, not 3, but just looking at that, it seems to be beneficial for at least that asset, but perhaps DeFi in general.
It's amazing. I wish I had known this before. I mean, look at this is uncanny how this is timing at this September. And if you take that and you correlate it with other things you're looking at on the chart, the fact that it had been bottoming out, the MACD was turning over, you're looking at let's say it's a 2x. But I mean, you have confidence going into, let's say, a trade. Not that I trade this one, I stake it, but this was certainly bottom vibes coming on. And if you understand the things you're explaining about these conjunctions, then you have that confidence to go into it because you can see, this was April. Here we are in September. And then the other one you mentioned was, you said December of 2020. And it goes into this. So once you've seen this correlation, there must be some, this is a change now. We're ready for that. And obviously it's broken right above major resistance and on its way into expansion again. So yeah, this is amazing.
I would like to pull up the specific dates because this is a triple square because of how they have retrograde motions. And so sometimes you get just a single one and then they move on. Other times it'll happen 2 or 3 times. Okay. And so we have this one occurring 3 times and they've kind of broken off. But because we're on this topic and the price connection, I would like to get the specific dates for 2024 and 2025. And I just haven't found it yet.
Okay.
I think it reappears in December and then it's like maybe April that it happens again. But here's a website that talks about it. Let me see if they got the dates jotted down.
Pull it up.
Okay, so it's 3 Jupiter Saturn squares between August 2024 and June 2025. The first one was August 19th. And there's a range on that too. So the exact square, August 19th, but you add a few months or a couple weeks before, a couple weeks afterwards. Okay. The next one is December 24th, exact. So again, same principle. And then June 15th, 2025.
Okay, so hang on. December 24th?
Yeah.
2025? No, 2024.
Yeah.
And then what was the other
June
day?
15th. June 15th. Yeah.
And these are reversal points where it switches again and then it goes back?
Yeah, so they're kind of oscillating in the sky. So you have this first pass where they make that 90-degree aspect, and then they'll make another one, like in a backwards motion. And then the third square is particularly significant because in that one, you also have Neptune adding in. Yeah, so it's going to be a Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune square because Saturn and Neptune will be conjunct. Okay. And that's also the third final closing square. So that's kind of like, okay, we've had our conversation, time to move on. And that's June 15th, 2025. I could actually see that being a good date for like the top of the bull run in general, but who knows?
100%. That lines up with some, things I'm toying around time-wise. Yeah, 100%. Sell in May, go away. Also, it lines up June 15th. Maybe that's the alts go nuts at the end of the spring into summer, and maybe that is a top. Yeah, very possible. I think we've opened up a can of worms here with this HEX thing and it being connected to Saturn and the HEX and the way it lined up so perfect.
That's interesting.
Yeah, really interesting. We didn't plan on this. I just met you. This is really cool. We'll have to do deeper sometime, but do not be freaked out if you get bombarded with messages and requests now, because I think we've opened up this can of worms. I didn't realize this going into it. This was all new to me. This is very cool. And I had an intuition. I was like, I think there's something here with some of the stuff you were talking about, and I didn't fully understand it, but I'm like, I want to learn more about this because I just felt like there's some connections here, and it was very far out. Cool.
My general feel is that if you have, like, for example, HEX has the symbology of the hex, the hexagram and everything. And so it's like, there is going to be, as a result of that, some level of resonance between things that have also expressed in nature as a hexagram. And so we see that with Saturn and that hexagram forming at the poles, as you mentioned. And so whether it's intentional or not, you're going to find those things resonating together to a greater degree because just inherently they have the same DNA signature. And so that's an interesting, I mean, I haven't really thought of this, but that's an interesting way to apply this, is that you could look at certain, for example, if we stick with cryptocurrency, certain blockchains or tokens, whatever, that have certain symbology to them. Yeah. Of course, vet out some of the other things, distribution, whatever, but then see if we can find those symbols expressed in other areas too, and then track those cycles and see if they correlate. That could be an interesting project for someone to do. There's this whole field is so wide open in tracking these correlations between these natural cycles. And it's like, I want so many more people to do this because I know I can't do it myself. And so it's not that hard, but if you're good at technical analysis, anyone can just start doing this. And like, you could very quickly, I think, make a YouTube channel that does pretty well because people are looking for interesting new things.
Yeah. You know, the markets are getting more competitive. I was talking to a friend of mine at a hedge fund, and he laid it out pretty simple. He's like, every 15-year-old knows TA now. So markets aren't going to turn at these perfect places anymore because market makers are also smart. They're using AI. They have machines that are helping them understand where to exploit the market best and how to. And that's why we're getting odd places. We had a high before the halving. We're having, interesting things. And I think this brings another dimension, a way to get confluence with what you're looking at. And as you saw just with HEX here, how incredibly it lined up. And anyone watching, we did not plan this. I didn't even tell you what HEX was before this. I just threw it at you all of a sudden. Because as we were talking, I just started thinking about it. Actually, I didn't even plan to pull up these charts, but it's right there, staring right in front of us. It's unbelievable. And so maybe this becomes something more people start investigating more deeper, and just something you can line up and see. Well, why not? It's working. I think the next question I might have for you is: do you think it's just lining up like this, or do you think market makers or whales or maybe a founder might be involved in this? As you were saying, Rockefeller say, millionaires don't use astrology, but billionaires do. Do you think they're aware of this and they're moving it based on these things? Or do you think, no, it's just in the stars, so to speak? We're drawn to these points. Because this is uncanny. This is uncanny.
Yeah, I don't think it's that well known. And there may be some people, but I mean, if you're like running a startup or something, these people don't have time typically to be looking at like the position of the stars. They don't care. Yeah. I think it's more just how it's influencing the experience of reality for everybody, including that person or people or organization. And some people are going to be more aware of it, but there's a few crypto astrology channels. They're super tiny. They are. And the production value could be higher, like more precise and to the point, and looking at historical analysis. I think it's just really, I view it as just a tool in the toolbox. And so when all of a sudden a lot of things are lining up, then you can be like, okay, now I'm feeling more confident that I can take some of this hard-earned money, because that's your work, energy, and time into some, just manifestation or just some figurative, thing that we've made, right? Yeah. I'm going to put that into something with, a greater expectation that it can do well. And so we just want to make sure we have more things lined up in our favor. And so that's definitely a big one, because it touches the bigger like cycles of our solar system, like our actual cosmos, right? You can't get bigger than that, really.
No, 100%. And your work is incredibly detailed. Like you were saying, the time thing. Yeah, I mean, it's obvious you have to put in a lot of time, a lot of research. You've had years of knowledge base and experience that are built into putting these charts together. And it's really amazing what you're doing. And it's incredible how it really does line up. It's amazing. And I'm going to learn more for sure. I would definitely want to talk to you again sometime as well, because you're also into, I saw the, the Bailey podcast, and you're also into Baalbek and Göbekli Tepe and UFO encounters and stuff. I think there's a lot of cool stuff we can talk about sometime.
Yeah, tons of stuff.
Yeah, that was like a 4-hour talk you did with him. You guys went into a lot of cool stuff. And so I'm amazed at your knowledge base, and very cool to see you applying it to crypto. And maybe we can do a deeper dive and look at some of these, like you're saying, DeFi, and see if that's where maybe a lot of the action is going to be pointed, because that's where I'm putting a bet. I think DeFi is going to be quite powerful, especially with the, you're seeing institutions cornering the market in crypto, and a lot of people are going to look to become what's the next DeFi thing. Bitcoin is obviously decentralized, but the big boys are here, so we're inevitably going to look for what's our next, what's the thing that's for us again. Where we until in 10 years they make their way into DeFi and they take that too. But this is very cool.
In general, I would just say that, I've just been looking at this on the side because I've always had an interest in financial markets, and I've been tracking space weather for a while and geophysics and different energies there. And I've been really researching heavily into these planetary resonances since 2020 or so, just because I have a curiosity and fascination here. But this is definitely just like a side project for me. And so the key with understanding this more is just, it's like technical analysis, just looking at lots of charts. Yeah. And so if someone was to go through a lot of different blockchain projects and line that up with these different natural synodic cycles, I think if they were to do that for 50 different, like the top 50 cryptocurrencies, for example, that person would walk away with their mind blown, because I've only done it for a few.
You've done a few,
And even with a few, looking at the first block astrology chart for Bitcoin, Monero, Dogecoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, some of these others, right? That's useful. But I haven't done it for all 50. Like that's a lot of work, but it's not an insurmountable amount.
Yeah.
And so if you just chip away at that, like that could really elevate our understanding of things if someone was to do that, or multiple people.
Well, before I let you go, we talked a lot about crypto really quick. We've got the sunspot activity. You've seen it's broken out again. It's gone above that 200 level we saw earlier on the chart. Do you expect things to get more volatile? Do you read anything into that in terms of more war, the elections? Do you think it calms and we just focus on markets again, or the chaos is going to increase? What do you see in that sense? Does it tell us that just things are just going to get wilder and more crazy? I know obviously was the World Economic Forum, Agenda 2030, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a date they're moving us toward with their shenanigans.
Yeah.
Are we getting?
Well, I mean, I think it's almost certain that we'll have a lot. We know we're going to have more solar activity in 2025 as compared to solar minimum, because sometimes we do get this dip in the middle of a solar cycle. And so you have this double peak. You have one at the beginning of maximum, and then you have this drop in sunspots, but still elevated over the minimum period. The minimum period will go right down to 0 sunspots. Whereas if you have this double peak, during that lull, it'll still be like 100 sunspots or something. And so even if 2025 is a lull because of, let's say, a double peak forming, and again, that's we don't know if that is going to happen, but it could occur. It'll still be elevated beyond minimum by at least probably 100 sunspots a month.
Okay.
And so just in general, then with that understanding, we know that 2025 and 2026, we're going to have heightened solar activity all the way through. And then we'll start to descend down in 2027, 2028, 2029, and 2030 will be kind of like the new solar minimum period around then.
2030? Okay.
Yeah, around then.
Ish,
and so then we have some big cycles coming up in 2032. And so to back up a little bit, the 2020s for the entire century, the 21st century, the 2020s have the greatest amount of planetary conjunctions. So where two planets meet in the sky, right? Jupiter, Uranus, Jupiter, Saturn. We also had Neptune or Pluto and Jupiter. We had a whole bunch in the beginning. We have Jupiter, Uranus this year. And then in 2025, we have Neptune and Saturn only 13 arc minutes apart, which is almost a conjunction, but not exact, just 13 arc minutes, one arc minute being 1/60th of a degree, 360 degrees. But then in 2026, they do meet up. And then we have 6 years where we don't get any conjunctions between the outer planets, any of these great conjunctions until 2032. And so, but the 2020s, even then, even with that 4-year period with nothing at the end of that decade, it still has the most great conjunctions of any decade in this century. And so there are other aspects that are important. There's a lot of other things, but great conjunctions are the most important. And we see that converging all in this decade. So we know it's going to be a pivotal decade and then stretching into 2032, 2033, because of that final conjunction, not final, but because of those conjunctions that happened then.
Yeah.
And if we add in solar activity, there are these 88 to 100 year long cycles of increasing and decreasing solar activity called Gleisberg cycles, Gleissberg, Gleisberg. And we had the bottom of a Gleisberg cycle with solar cycle 24. So the 2010s, we had that low period of solar activity. The 2010s also basically had no great conjunctions between the outer planets. And so we had this oscillation both with solar activity and with these planetary resonances, where the 2010s, there were effectively, like there was one like 2011, but if we just look at the majority of the 2010s, there were none of these great conjunctions between the planets where they're lined up in the sky. We also had the lowest solar activity in 100 years. And now we are coming out of that. Solar cycle 25, 2 times stronger than predicted in 2019. We have the most planetary conjunctions of the entire century in this decade. And then that Gleisberg cycle is likely, we don't know, but it's likely to continue. And solar activity is likely to get stronger and stronger each solar cycle until about 2050. If it follows a Gleisberg cycle trend, which we see very clearly in the data. Sometimes there's anomalous things, but that's what we see. So
there was some, I saw some articles like Science, they were saying, the world ends in 2050.
Yeah.
They predicted, because the AI is taking over in 2030, and then they only give us one generation until the AI gets rid of us.
We're doomed.
Yeah, we're doomed. Yeah, so 2050, it's over.
Yep.
Well, Stefan, man, this is awesome. Do you want people to reach out to you? Do you want people to?
Yeah, I mean, you can always comment on my YouTube channel. So YouTube at Stefan Burns. I read all the comments or as best I can.
Yeah.
And then, I also, as we talked about right before we started, I also just kind of relogged into my Twitter. So, I mean, I guess that is a thing. I don't know how it works, but you can reach out to me there if you want. I'll check it every now and then.
Cool. I'll put those links down below. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll definitely do this again at some point. Just let me know when. This is really easy to connect with you, so that was great.
This is cool. Yeah, let's do it again for sure. Let's touch base again. Any closing thoughts? Anything you want to leave us with? Anything else?
Oh, just I would say don't underestimate the sun. Just keep your eye on it, because it does seem to be connected to some of these big world events. We see. I just having tracked this now for a while. We see like big solar flares right around like pivotal moments and inflection points, and or even like lunar cycles and different like phases of the moon are connected to that too. And so it's just interesting to explore. Just go into it with an open mind. And, I think some of our society and culture has kind of programmed people to just think all that stuff is nonsense. But that's really a recent phenomenon. Like only in the past, 100 years has that been programmed. All of history before that was an awareness and recognition that we were affected by these things. And so, you go back to Rome, all the emperors of Rome had like court astrologers, right? And all the kings, and going back to like ancient Egypt and ancient Babylon, and even before to ancient civilizations, they were all centered around understanding these, what you could call planetary resonances. And so it's only now that we've been deluded into thinking that, oh, they're nothing, like we are above and beyond all this stuff. And so I think that is a great deception that's been kind of instilled into people that takes a little bit of time to break out of. And the way to break out of it is just keep an open mind and just devote like 5% of your bandwidth to like tracking this stuff, even 1%, 0.5%. Just keep an eye on it every now and then, which is a good way to just like track patterns. And then you'll start to see, oh, there's some correlations here. This keeps lining up. That's interesting. And so that's the key.
Awesome, brother. Well, I'm definitely going to devote a good amount of bandwidth to it. These correlations are uncanny, and I'm going to bring it into my toolbox, man. And your channel is amazing. Everyone definitely go follow YouTube, Stefan BURNS. And I look forward to chatting with you again.
Great. Well, thank you so much, brother. And hodl.
Hodl. Let's go. All right. Later, brother. Cheers.